Okay, so in the last video, I covered these compact stackable blueprints, and people definitely want to see more, especially the more complicated designs. I mean, despite what it looks, this is actually a relatively simple design. Please go and watch the video. It's a lot simpler than it looks. But before I go into the more complicated designs, I think it's very important that I cover these more compact building methods. So that's what we're going to do today. Okay, and last time I briefly showed this ultra compact stack that you could make. And one of the questions I got was, can you make this into a blueprint? Which seems like a natural question. It looks like the sort of thing that you would very easily turn into a blueprint to save you the effort of building it every single time. But I'm actually going to make the case right now that this is not a very good use of blueprints for most cases, and in fact you're much better off building it by hand every single time, because this is deceptively simple. But let's just delete the two splitters, and let me show you something. This splitter, at the top, this splitter can't rotate. We'll click it on. At the bottom, this splitter actually has 3 different ways that it can have its input. So actually, there's 3 different possible machines here just with the 2 splitters. But then, well, what if we have mergers? Well, the merger can rotate 3 different ways on top, but it can't rotate on bottom. So if you have 2 mergers, there's 3 different ways of doing that. But then what if you have a merger on top and a splitter on bottom? Well, then you've actually got 9 different ways of doing it. And the last example is the merger which doesn't rotate and the splitter which doesn't rotate. Only one of those. So we've actually got the 1 merger to splitter version, plus 3 merger to merger, plus 3 splitter to splitter, plus 9 splitter to merger combos. It's got 16 possibilities. But then you got to remember something, which is that this lift is actually an up lift. It could also be a down lift, which doubles the number of possibilities. So we're going to multiply this whole thing by 2. Now you've got 32 possibilities. But one thing we're going to learn today is that there's actually a lot more going on. In fact, you can do things like you can have offset designs. And these offset designs, there are actually 7 different possibilities from one end of the lift and 5 different from the other end of the lift. The start and the end of the lift actually matter. And I'm not talking about like the direction the lift is traveling. I'm talking about the direction that you build the lift from. So there's actually, I don't know, it's hard to calculate, but you'll have to trust me that it's actually times 7 times 5. So now we have 1120. And then you also might want to build one like this. We'll just pop this up by 1 extra. We'll slap a merger on that, we'll hold it, we'll move it over a certain number, we'll delete these, we'll grab this, we'll put it in here, and now we have a stack that's actually an extra meter taller. There's a 1 meter gap in here, and now you could say that this goes onto the odd grid, which is sometimes something you need to do. So that actually multiplies it by 2, and then if you want to do non-compact versions, there's even more options. So we're already up to 2,000 though. Oh my goodness, I actually forgot one of the possibilities, because this belt here, this is a little 180 degree belt, but the belts could rotate in 4 different directions. So you can actually do something like this. So all this, we actually have to multiply by 4. I even forgot that. There we are, we're really up to 9,000. It's not over 9,000, but you know, we're close enough. I don't even think that I used the mini stack that I built in the last video in the design, because at the front of the machine, I've got these triple stacks, and then at the back of the machine, I've got these long stacks. Let's not forget this little stack, which I didn't even mention in the last video, but I just kind of made it and no one really questioned it. So I think it's fair to say that the number of possibilities is in excess of, there's more than... It's over a number that... I'm not doing meme clips. So doing things this way is a little bit like wanting 1 key on your keyboard for every word in your language, rather than building those words from letters. You're much better off just learning the grammar and learning how to construct things so that you can build whichever piece that you particularly happen to want on that given day. So while a lot of tutorials will give you like step-by-step instructions of put this here, move this across by 3, do this, blah, 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 click here, do this, I'm going to try not to do that very much today. There's nothing wrong with that. It does help to show you how some of the principles apply, but the point is to teach you the principles, right? Once you get fluent in this language, it's much, much easier and faster to just speak the language than to thumb through a phrasebook all the time. I'm mixing my metaphors. Don't worry about it. It still works. The phrasebook in this case is the list of blueprints. So that's what this video is going to be about. I'm going to teach you some of these principles. There's a fair bit to cover, so let's get into it. So the first thing you need to learn about this is how to count, which you probably already know, but you know, we're going to talk about the grid. This grid here on the Blueprint Designer is a 1 meter square grid. And that's exactly the same grid that things snap to on the foundations. So the things you need to learn about this are belts are 2 meters wide. Lifts are 2 meters square, and they have a 1 meter offset from this cowling. It's all very clear on the lines here. Mergers and splitters are 4 meters square. So that's 2 meters for the connections, and then an extra meter that accommodates the other connections. And those are the most important parts. Every single connection in this game sits on the grid as long as you're using the foundations. You can go off the grid, but generally you don't want to do that. Another thing to remember is that every other machine also, their inputs and outputs sit on the grid. So we can use a lift and we can snap it here and we can show, given this 1 meter offset, that the actual plane of this connection is here. So if we snap it in, you can see that the cowling extends and it goes all the way in. It's hard to read where this connection extends to, but if we go to something like a constructor, the plane is actually in a different spot. So if we snap this here, you can see that the actual line of the connection, given that it's a 1 meter offset, it's here. They all lie on the grid, but the models are all slightly different in how they show it. The mergers and splitters are actually the easiest to read because they just have the edge of the machine is right at the line of the connection. Very, very simple. When you connect to that, you can see there's a 1 meter offset right from that spot. Okay, now also a quick note about what I would consider to be acceptable clipping. Now, please don't take me as an authority on this. The last thing I ever want is people to come to me asking, you know, hey, is this acceptable? Is this not? I don't care. You have to decide for yourself. Life is a series of judgment calls. Learn to live it. But when you stack a conveyor splitter on another splitter, for instance, the cowling on the roof gets effectively clipped through itself, and it's almost like the build tool removes that cowling or that bulkhead and just bolts them together. And so in my mind, the actual operational part of this is all in this 2 meter height here, and this extra bit here is just bulkhead. It's just a case. It's not actually important. And so in my mind, you can clip anything through that, and I think the design supports this. So I'll just show you quickly. We'll just make a bridge across it with this conveyor belt, and you can see that the conveyor belt from above doesn't look like there's any clipping going on. You can see it kind of clips through, but you can also again imagine the builder just removing that part of the bulkhead and creating a channel through this that this thing can build in. There are plenty of other examples where you can imagine that this is working just fine. Another one is here. You can see when we have this splitter clipping onto the conveyor lift, you can see that there's actually no hole under here, so the stuff will just clip right through. I just kind of ignore that. I assume the only reason they didn't model a hole in this is just because you need to create a bunch of different models of the mergers and splitters, and that would just be performance hungry. One thing they could do though, you can see here inside the lift head that the hole is actually just a blank plane. And they could always add another blank plane just here, just to cover this clipping. I think that'd look just fine. But for now, I'm willing to just basically suspend my disbelief. This is what I mean by a series of judgment calls. Just decide for yourself. To fail to make judgment calls and think for yourself is to abdicate the privilege of being a person, in my opinion. Okay, so now we're going to show you how to count when it comes to these things. The first connection we're going to make is the standard connection, and that has a 1 meter offset. And you can also connect this just normally. It'll snap in, no wuckers, mate. And we're going to call that a 1 meter offset. There's a bunch of different offsets you can find. If we do anything more than a 1 meter offset, like this is a 2 meter offset, well, that's not really an offset. It's really just disconnected, and we just need to bridge it with a belt, okay? The other standard offset is actually what I would call a negative 2 meter offset. Or you could also call it a 2 meter inset or a complete inset. This is what happens when a merger or a splitter snaps to the head of a lift. But there's a bunch more options. So we're going to put this in here, and we're going to move it here. Hold it, yep, click, rotate, snap, bang. That is a flush offset, or there's no offset. It's a 0 offset. I'm going to go even further. I'm going to put it here, hold, click, bring it in. That is a 1 meter inset or a negative 1 meter offset. And of course, we can just go in here and do the complete inset, the negative 2 meter inset. And I'll be honest with you, before I made this video, these are the only offsets I ever used, but I've realized that there are other options as well. So we're just going to put this here, hold, bring it in, control, and now we have a 0.5 meter offset. Going to go past the flush one, go in by 0.5 meter again, 0.5 meter inset or a negative 0.5 meter offset. And now again, we're going to do hold, 1.5, so that is a negative 1.5 meter offset. These are all the offsets that you can use, and there is also over in here a naughty corner because there are some cursed methods here. Of course there are cursed methods. Why wouldn't there be? It's video games. Okay, in twice, in again by half, click, spin, snap. Negative 2.5 meter offset. This one look, you can do it. I generally won't because, for instance, this looks like an available input, and this looks like who knows what the hell is going on here, but the cowling has actually extended out past the machine. I can actually select it just by pointing at the cowling. And just real quick, just to prove that we can't go any further with this. Sorry. Okay. You can go further. That's a -3 meter inset, or a -3 meter offset. Okay, this doesn't always work. I want to be very, very clear about that. This is not always possible. Oh dear. I tested this and it didn't work, but it worked now. So there you go. Okay, I do this. I've got to check the next one, obviously. 1, 2, 3, in by half, click. Okay, it didn't snap. I'm somewhat relieved. So we've got from +1 in half increments all the way to -2. And remember, I only used the whole numbers up to this point. I might actually find uses for the half increments. I haven't tried yet, but you know, it's an option. That's in your tool belt now. And just to prove that these all work, we're just going to bring it over here. Okay, so we're going to test all of these. Now, we shall let loose the rocket fuel canisters things. Yep, all coming through, all coming through. So those are all valid connections. Yeah, that's repeatable. It's a thing you can do. I don't. Again, up to you. It's knowledge in your belt. Some knowledge is dangerous and forbidden, but go for it. Now, there are even more offsets. I've got the same setup here. We're just going to go for it. Here we go. There's your standard connection. Now, the standard connection actually has a 1 meter offset from this lift and a 1 meter offset from this lift. So I call this a +2 offset. And then we can go into the 1 offset, the flush or 0 offset, and now we're getting into the -1 offset. And of course, we've got all the half steps. And just like before, we have a naughty corner. And this one's, I don't know, is it more cursed? I'm going to go in half a step. So this is 1.5 inset. That works. And this is the full inset, completely clipping. This one is confusing to look at. It makes you feel like there are connections there that actually aren't there. So I wouldn't use it, but there's an argument to be made that that fulfills a niche that you wouldn't otherwise be able to fulfill. I get it. I'd avoid using it. This one, now it looks wrong, okay? This one actually really looks like it's kind of cursed and like, why is it like that? But actually, if you understand the nuance of the situation, it's even worse than it looks. So for a start, this is actually identical to just having a straight lift. It's functionally absolutely no different. Not only is it no different, it's harder to build because you need to place one end and then manually place the other end correctly in order to actually build it, which is a bunch of extra steps. I had to make this thing hover off the ground before I built this one, and that's a step that you didn't see. Just don't use this. In fact, I'm just going to leave this thing right next to it just to shame it by showing you how clearly the same it is. So there you go, that's all the offsets. In both cases, you've actually got 7 different levels. Here it goes -2 to +1, and here it goes from -1 to +2, but ultimately you wind up with 7 levels, plus the 2 cursed levels. There's a bit more going on here. These offsets work with any input or output to any machine. So for instance, I'll just grab an industrial storage container. So if I wanted to do an offset here, I can click this, put it in here, grab a merger or a splitter, put it on there, delete the belt, grab the belt back, put it back in, and it snaps in, and now you have a fully inset lift. And any offset you want to do from that full inset, you just need to move this splitter in or out a little bit. So for instance, I want to make it compact, I can put it down here, hold it, move it across one, and then I can grab this other lift, I'll delete this, grab this, put it in, and uh-oh, that snaps. We need to occupy that, bring it in. There we go. Now we have a compact -1 offset lift coming out of this storage container. Very, very simple to do. You can also go off to the side. It's a little bit more of a faff to do it this way, but you can do it. Easier to make this go in when you do it like this. And I will go to a splitter because that gives me the right inputs that I want. So let's say we want to lift with a -1 offset that's going off to the left. So we'll just grab this. And we're not going to compact this, so we need it to be 1, 2, 3, 4, and you can see how the 2 and then the 1 for the offset, that makes that counting correct. And now this is actually lined up for a flush offset because you can see this is 2 and then 1. But this thing here, if you had a lift there, that would be flush. So we're going to move it across 1 because we're targeting a -1 offset. We're going to put this here and we're going to make sure that the output is facing the right direction so that we can actually build the lift. And then we'll delete our scaffolding, click the lift in there, bam. I'd use that. I don't think that that's clipping too badly. Now you might think that's great. We can do all kinds of connections like this. There are all types of options. There are actually some that don't work. Now with these offsets, the order of building matters a lot. So let's say I build a splitter here, I build a lift, and then I just want to add a splitter on top, right? Now because I built this lift starting from here, it's got the standard 1 meter offset, and then we can snap it into here. But let's just say we want to go back the other direction. Well, we can snap it that way. And now the offset's completely different. We can just go back and forth like this as long as we want, but that would get boring. So when we're building from right to left like this, we can always do something like this, and we can change the offset. So we can go like that, and then we can always delete this. We can grab this, snap it in, and then we got a flush connection here. And of course, we can reverse that direction and just make the flush connection happen over here. That can be useful for manipulating the positions of lifts to get around things when you're building in compact spaces. But let's say we've got something like this, and let's just say we have to have the lift here and we have to have the mergers here and here. Well, we can manually place this using scaffolding, but I'll just show you, if I can scroll this like this in all 4 directions, then no valid connection is being made. And with a configuration like this, because we can only snap the end of the lift and not the start, you can never have this configuration with 2 valid connections without some dirty, nasty, naughty hacks. If we just do a quick test, you can see that that connection is not real. So if we want to make this work, I would caution you against using this, but there is a trick. Add a little belt, and that makes the connection work. Now this trick will work for a flush offset and a plus or minus ½ meter offset. It won't work for any of the others, but this is something you can do. The only problem is when you get in there, you can't actually access this belt. You can't figure out, like double check what speed the belt is or upgrade it or anything like that. So if you wanted to make any adjustments to this, you wanted to change it, you figured out that this was actually a bottleneck and you need to upgrade the belt for some reason, you'd need to delete this, delete this, delete this, rebuild all the scaffolding, and start again basically from scratch in order to make any changes to that at all. Let's say you wanted to connect 2 mergers like this. You can do exactly the same sort of thing. The normal connections just won't work. It's absolutely impossible because of the offsets. But we'll just move this one across, grab this, snap it in, add the scaffolding, delete that, bring this back, put it into place, and then again, of course, the mini belt. I think this is where we hit the limit. It won't work here. This is a -1 offset or a 1 meter inset. Conveyor belt is too short, so this is the limit. Again, though, I would discourage you from using these hacky tiny little belts. It obscures readability. But you know, when you're doing a blueprint, you can test things and verify that they're working and then not come back to them. So as long as you're thorough with your testing when you use something like this, it's probably not a huge problem. But if you want to upgrade your belts, oh my goodness. But that is an option. You can't snap it into all of them, but you do have access to everything from -0.5 to 1 and also -2, because those are the standard offsets, as well as these slightly cursed hacky ones. And this is just a quick demo. Like I said, you can use this on any input and output. Check this junk out. The glory of all the options you have with constructors, and then you can also change whether they're pointing left or right. Now, it's kind of cool actually, when this machine moves, we'll just quickly test it. This plate goes up and down. Look at it go. And it fits exactly around the lift. There's a tiny bit of clipping, but it's almost like it was designed for a lift head to go in there. The other issue is, though, this cowling extends and kind of gets in the way of the animation. You might not like this. I would avoid it for this reason, but you know, it's not too bad. But you can do this with every machine and just decide for yourself what you think works. Another thing you'll notice is that in general, I use mergers and splitters for all of my scaffolding. I don't really use these stackable conveyor poles. I did do it in the last video because I didn't have space for a merger or a splitter at the edge of the Blueprint Designer. But generally I'll avoid these because once you stack them up, if you try to place one like this, that building can't be nudged. So if you don't place it correctly in the start, you're going to have trouble. You can actually zoop it up as far as 10, hold it and move the whole stack, but that's about as far as you can go. And then once you've got this stack, you need to make sure that you delete the whole stack when you're done, which can be a little bit tedious. I find it much, much easier to just stack mergers and splitters. And part of the reason for that is it doesn't matter where you are in your factory or how high up you are, you can always do this. And you can also always position them using lifts, right? It doesn't matter how high up they need to go. You can just zoop them up with a lift, place one there, and then once you're up there, you can just hold them, move them around, delete the previous scaffolding, and keep on going. If you place one slightly wrong, you can just place one next to it, maybe move it across one or wherever you need to go, delete it, build it back. It's very, very flexible. You can work in space very easily with this because all of the machines in Satisfactory hover. And as mentioned before, if you want to get a merger or a splitter onto the odd grid, you just move this up by one, and then suddenly you're on the odd grid. So, mergers and splitters for scaffolding is my advice. You can use these other things for scaffolding, but generally speaking for me, they're a last resort. And it's also very important that you can work up in the air with this scaffolding method, because if we're using blueprints, you can't snap blueprints to anything. Unless we have like a frame floor or some sort of other grid-based scaffolding, we can't make this snap anywhere useful. We can't snap it to belts or to lifts or to anything. And if you do go to the effort of placing a blueprint properly, you need to check that the spacing isn't wrong. We've got this short stack blueprint over here. And let's just say we want to stack this on top of itself. So we grab one, we go into blueprint mode. Now, the bounding boxes of blueprints aren't the same necessarily as the bounding boxes of the machines that are inside them. So when I stack that on there, guess what happens? I'm going to snap one in here, bring it up. One of these is an input and one of them is an output. They are aligned, but they're not aligned vertically, so they will never snap. This thing is now completely off the grid and you can't attach to it with any of the lifts. So aligning them, you've suddenly given yourself a big new headache. And this problem shows up in lots of places. So for instance, we'll just make a quick ceiling here. And now we'll grab this short stack thing here and snap it to the ceiling. That is also off the grid. Here we go. We'll align this like this, align it like that. We know that that should snap in, but it doesn't because look, the height is completely wrong. So there are all sorts of situations where this becomes a problem. If you need to snap something to the roof, by the way, one way that you can do it is just with a ceiling mount, and then we can get a conveyor lift off of that, and then we can get a merger onto that, and now you've got everything still on the factory grid, and it works perfectly. Okay, so that is the end of the tutorial, and I hope that you can see, for instance, in this manufacturer blueprint that I've got, how some of these offsets are part of the design, right? Now I want to make videos on that topic as well as my 2-2 balances, my 3-3 balances, and my 4-4 balances. But for now, the tutorial is over, and we'll just do a little bit of channel talk while I build this heavy modular frame line. So the response to the last couple of videos has been pretty huge. I really appreciate all the nice comments people have left me. It's been really great. I still don't want to make this into a Satisfactory channel. Obviously, it's a trending topic right now. You know, I've gotten a huge algorithm bump from that and whatever, just, you know, to talk shop a little bit. But, whoa, hello, I fell off the edge. Yeah, that looks all right. And, you know, I've had videos about Satisfactory in my head for ages, and I don't want to stop making them. And now is obviously the time to make them. So I'm definitely going to do that. And I'm going to do the ones that are in my head, basically. But the plan is to make these videos that I want to make. At some point, I'm going to switch to my other stuff. I'm never going to stop playing Satisfactory. It's obviously a huge, deep game that scratches a lot of itches that I have. Ooh, I'm so itchy. Yeah, it's a great phrase. Thanks for that. That should be receiving modular frames. If you go back through my history of videos, you'll see a lot of the stuff that I'm actually interested in. It's just piles of stuff. Interior train camera. Oh, it's so cool. We can't go to Grove de Fossé yet. We have to actually add a train station up that end. Boing. Yeah, I've been making videos for quite a few years now. I put a lot of effort into them, and they're about a huge range of things. And I don't think I'd be able to maintain that level of energy for just one topic. I'd end up manufacturing videos, you know, just as excuses to make things, just to fill the niche, which I just don't. That's not my, you know, I got no judgment for people who do that or whatever, but that's not what I would be passionate about. I would not be able to maintain the energy, and the quality would drop. And frankly, I just want to be able to make the videos that I want to make. And, you know, hopefully the people that like this style, they'll stick around for that, you know. Oh, hang on. Just quickly while we're here. This is the triple conveyor lift floor hole technique. So we're just going to snap that in there, bring this one up here, bring this over here, snap it in, and now we can delete this, put this one here, compact connection between the hanging storage container and the train station. It went straight into tutorial mode. Look at that. Off we go, right over the top of that one. So yeah, if you like my style, then, you know, please subscribe, stick around. There's a lot more to come. Oh, I can spin my neck all the way around. I think the storage that I just built is actually completely useless. I love these interior cameras. It makes the world feel bigger. Definitely gonna make a video on these smooth train tracks as well. They're easy to make and they look good. Yes, the modular frame line is under construction. We're not quite there yet. Is this a metaphor? Maybe. Ah, come back. No. Don't miss the train. Is this also a metaphor? Okay, so the fact that I called it a metaphor, made it clear that I was aware of it, and left it in means it is a metaphor. That's how writing works. I did miss the train. Don't read too much into that, please. Come back.